Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping in for a high-stakes, behind-the-scenes look at Federation leadership that often feels less like diplomacy and more like trench warfare.
Right.
We're not focusing on the clean public statements or, the polished history books.
No.
We are going straight into the internal documents, the frantic staff memos, the secret meetings, and the desperate, morally gray power plays that defined President Nan Bacco's explosive first year in office.
That's right. Our source material today is just incredibly rich. It paints this visceral picture of a newly elected leader. I mean, she's still dusting herself off from this swift and unexpected election after her predecessor's sudden resignation.
And she's immediately plunged into just utter chaos.
Utter chaos. She is constantly battling the economic and political legacies of the Dominion War, the immense, stifling bureaucracy of the Palais de la Concorde, and maybe most critically, an inherited secret that threatens the entire, very fragile Klingon alliance.
So our mission today is surgical. We're digging in to uncover the critical pivots, the key insights, and really the moral calculus required to run the largest interstellar government in the quadrant.
Yeah, we're looking at how power is really used in that environment.
Exactly. How key appointments are fought over, why political gridlock is just the norm, and maybe most disturbingly, how international crises are sometimes, manufactured by the executive branch and sometimes just barely managed to prevent a full-on galactic war.
And for you, the learner, this isn't just political history or some fictionalized timeline. This is a functional manual on high-level crisis management.
100%.
It demonstrates in stark detail how a president has to navigate political gridlock, ethical trade-offs, some of them are just staggering in their proportions, and unexpected betrayals just to keep the entire galaxy from collapsing into a new conflict. Bacco's first year is a study in surviving under impossible pressure in what the locals charmingly call Paris, the City of Light.
A city that internally seems to be dealing with a whole lot of brownouts.
You could say that.
Okay, let's start with the literal foundations of power. The seat of the Federation government isn't some new, isolated orbital complex or a neutral moon in deep space.
No, it's firmly rooted on Earth, specifically in Paris. We are talking about the cylindrical 15-story Palais de la Concorde.
And the location itself is so much more than just geography, right? It's a statement.
It's a physical commitment to history. The sources tell us the structure itself is massive, supported by these huge duranium beams, and it literally straddles the Champs-Élysées. It connects the two sides of that historical thoroughfare.
And the Champs-Élysées, that's been Paris's main artery for what? 7 centuries?
7 centuries. And it is the very place where the Traité d'Unification was signed 250 years ago. The building is designed to symbolize that deep, fundamental connection between Earth's political history and the Federation nexus that now governs trillions of beings.
It's the physical embodiment of the phrase, the past is prologue, and President Bacco is operating right at the top of that nexus.
Yep. Her office is this incredible, airy half circle on the 15th floor, and it's got this panoramic window view of the River Seine, the Tour Eiffel, and of course the Champs-Élysées running right underneath. It's the height of power, literally and figuratively.
Yet for all that grandeur, Bacco herself is described in these internal notes as someone who just despises meetings.
Hates them with a fiery passion, but she is fiercely passionate about the work of politics. She was elected quickly after Zife's abrupt resignation, having served as the governor of Cestus III.
And her style is really defined by that tension, isn't it?
It is. She has these incredibly high expectations, demands wit from her staff, and uses this refreshingly candid language. We see quotes like, the government's grinding to a damn halt. When she's frustrated, she values authenticity and results over, political theater.
We also get these great humanizing details about her. She's a huge baseball fan, specifically the Cestus III, CBL, the Pike City Pioneers.
Right. And she keeps holographic images of her daughter, Annabella, and her parents right there on her desk. She's maintaining that connection to her life before the Palais.
Her team is just a microcosm of the Federation's diversity and its internal political landscape.
Absolutely. You've got Chief of Staff Esperanza Pinheiro, a former Starfleet officer who's known for her sharp wit and political agility. She's the one who can translate Bacco's frustrated honesty into actionable policy.
And then there's Deputy COS Ashante Fury, who's managing the day-to-day grind.
And Ashante's husband, Fred McDougan, is the speechwriter. Now, Fred is apparently incredibly eloquent, but the sources paint him as intensely sensitive about his work. He gets visibly irritated if Bacco adds little meaningless words to his text, like, well.
Wow. That's such a tiny insight, but it shows the kind of ego management that even a president's chief of staff has to handle every single day.
Exactly. The little things are often the most telling, and we cannot forget Z4 Blue.
The Nasat, right. He was a forest
Yeah.
quadrant governor.
He was, and he gave that up for this job. He's often misunderstood. There's this Zocdorn staffer, Mick Bunkrip, who sometimes just fails to grasp his dry humor.
Mm-hmm.
But Z4 proves to be one of the most insightful members of the team. He has this unique ability to assess leadership potential and moral character, which becomes crucial later on.
Okay, so let's talk about that bureaucracy, because this is where the grand ideals of the Palais just slam into the everyday, frustrating reality of governing. The script gives us this fascinating detail about the transportation office.
Specifically, a Damiani named Niel Gulo.
Yeah. This deep dive into the operational chaos reveals a pretty astounding failure point.
It's unbelievable. Bacco was scheduled to dedicate the Dominion War Memorial Museum at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. This required her to leave the Palais an hour early and fly a shuttle across 2 continents.
Then why?
Because both transporter bays in the Palais, which are mandated to be on separate, staggered maintenance cycles, were down at the same time.
A rare 5% overlap in maintenance. I mean, the probability was minuscule, but it happened.
It happened, and it forced the president, who is the single most important person in the Federation security grid, into surface travel.
And this is so much more than just an inconvenience. It really illustrates the inherent danger of the job.
And the fragility of high-level security. So, security calls a presidential shuttle trip Golden Gate. Now, you or I might hear that and think of the beautiful bridge in San Francisco.
Right.
But the security detail uses that term specifically to refer to when the Breen invaded Earth during the war and destroyed the Golden Gate Bridge.
That is a staggering amount of pressure. It links the most mundane planning failure, a transporter breakdown, with the most devastating historical attack on Earth.
Precisely. The code word neatly summarizes the life-or-death security nightmare of flying the president out in the open, compounded by moving between the 2 highest traffic, highest risk zones in the sector, Paris and San Francisco. It shows the incredible immediate stress on the staff.
Let's transition now from bureaucratic chaos to the foundational hidden crisis that defines Bacco's entire administration, the legacy of former President Min Zife. Officially, Zife resigned 3 years into his second term due to the strain of managing the Federation after the war. And we know that strain was immense.
Oh, yeah. The Troll government collapse, the Genesis disaster, conflicts with the Selvians, Thulians, Ontelians, Tezwa. The Federation was still reeling.
But that was the noble public spin.
That was the spin, designed to offer stability. The truth, known only to a tight circle including Bacco, her chief of staff Esperanza, and Admiral Ross, is chilling. Zife, his chief of staff Cole Azernal, and a cabinet member, Nelino Kofina, secretly armed Tezwa.
Which is an independent world right on the volatile Klingon border. This was an act of profound international criminality.
It was.
And what did they arm them with? And why Tezwa, of all places?
They armed them with Nadian pulse cannons. Now, these weren't standard Starfleet-issue weapons. These were originally failed Borg weapons prototypes. They were unstable and devastating.
And they got them through the Orion Syndicate.
Through the Orion Syndicate. The use of the Syndicate here is key. It shows that Zife's administration was willing to broker deals with one of the Quadrant's most ruthless criminal enterprises to supply banned weaponry to a volatile client state on a critical, sensitive border. They chose Tezwa because they thought it was a strategic choke point against potential Klingon expansion.
And the catastrophe that resulted from this calculated risk was?
It was catastrophic. Zife knew the weapons were operational on Tezwa, but failed to warn either the Klingons or Starfleet. Specifically, the USS Enterprise was patrolling nearby before Tezwa's prime minister, Kinshon, used them against a Klingon task force,
leading to thousands of deaths.
The immediate, agonizing deaths of thousands of Klingon warriors. The cover-up had to be massive and instantaneous because exposure would have instantly triggered the Klingons' right of vengeance under the Treaty of Alliance.
Which would have meant a full-scale war between the Federation and the Klingon Empire.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The Starfleet intervention. This wasn't a peaceful retirement that Zife took.
No, the sources are blunt. This was a coup, executed non-publicly and illegally. Starfleet found out about the crime. Admiral William Ross, a former security advisor and commander-in-chief, forced Zife, Azernal, and Kofina to resign, quite literally at phaser point.
At phaser point.
And then took them to a secret retirement. Ross justified this as the only necessary course of action. He believed Zife's action brokering illegal arms leading to mass death and then covering it up was an act of depraved indifference.
Wait, hold on. Ross forced the president out at phaser point. That's a military coup. How can Bacco, an elected civilian leader, justify maintaining power knowing her predecessor was overthrown by Starfleet? Isn't she now compromised?
That is the central ethical tightrope Bacco walks every single day. Ross's defense, which Bacco eventually accepts, is one of chilling pragmatism. He argued that the political integrity of the Federation was secondary to its existence. If Zife's crimes had come out, the Federation would have ceased to exist in its current form because of a devastating war with the Klingons.
So Ross made a terrifying illegal choice to save galactic stability.
He did. The threat of a military dictatorship was considered less dangerous than the guarantee of intergalactic war.
That chilling reality, that high-ranking Starfleet officers were willing and able to perform a covert overthrow of the government, potentially executing former leaders just to maintain peace, that must weigh on Bacco constantly. She inherited a bomb where the fuse was already lit.
And that secret bomb is now threatening to explode thanks to a determined journalist.
That would be Osla Graniff, a reporter from The Seeker who has returned from Tezwa. She went there to cover the devastation left by Kinchon's guerrillas and the Klingon orbital assault, all spurred on by the death of her colleague, Varatel.
Right, who was killed by Kinchon's forces. So Graniff is emotionally invested and absolutely relentless.
Her investigation is a masterclass.
It really is. She didn't just interview officials, she went deep. She spoke to the mistress of one of Kinchon's adjutants, Major Meberas, who confirmed the crucial fact that the Federation supplied the cannons. Even more damningly, she penetrated the Orion Syndicate.
She met with a lieutenant named
Ihez, who was cabinet member Quafina's direct client in the arms deal.
Wow.
Exactly. Ihez confirmed that Zife had done business with Quafina, that he never got the final payment after Zife's sudden departure, and critically, that Starfleet, led by Admiral Ross, forced Zife's resignation to prevent a public scandal.
So Graniff now has proof of the war crime, the Orion Syndicate connection, and the military coup.
She has the whole package. That is the ultimate political weapon.
So Graniff then presents an ultimatum to the press liaison, Count Jarrell. She will run the story unless Jorel provides her with a reason not to.
And Jarrell immediately understands that a reason not to means one thing: neutralizing Admiral Ross's undue and illegal influence over the Federation. Graniff isn't seeking revenge. She's seeking to restore civilian control and transparency by removing the unelected power broker who committed the coup. The Zife scandal is no longer about the past.
It's about Bacco's legitimacy right now.
Right.
The inherited Zife crisis may be the existential threat, but Bacco also faces immediate public gridlock with the Federation Council.
Yeah.
I mean, she's governing under siege from day one.
The first major battle was a purely ethical one, and Bacco started it herself. She immediately creates conflict by publicly railing into the council over the renewal of the Alagar trade agreement.
Which was about the mineral kelonite.
Right. And she argued against renewing it because over 90% of Alagar's population are unpaid, oppressed workers. It's slavery, effectively. They're just discarded when they get injured or too old.
She used her moral compass as a public weapon.
She did. Her position was non-negotiable. If Alagar won't change its ways, the Federation must refuse to be complicit. This display of personal conviction, while admirable, led directly to a political disaster.
A 6-week council deadlock.
Complete stonewalling. The council delayed confirming key appointments and stalled legislation as a way of punishing the president for what they saw as, disrespect and idealism over economic pragmatism.
That's a classic battle between ideology and function. But the surprising takeaway here is Bacco's response. She didn't double down.
No, she sacrificed her pride. She performed this incredibly atypical move for a president, giving a formal public apology to the council for her lack of respect.
She recognized that being ethically right wasn't the same as being politically effective.
Exactly. Her words were crucial. She admitted that she was unfair and let her personal feelings about Alagar cloud her judgment about the council's dignity. This moment of humility was key. It restored communication and, just as importantly, allowed the council members a face-saving way to back down.
And that immediately opened up the fierce debate over appointments, particularly the open seat on the Judiciary Council, left vacant by Councillor Melness's retirement.
The candidates for that seat really highlighted Bacco's political dilemma. The establishment favorite was Councillor Artrin Nayel, a Triaxian described as middle of the road.
Right, 6 years on the council.
But the staff also debated Counselor Eliana, who was experienced but considered controversial due to her minority opinions on issues like criminal rehabilitation and, significantly, having voted against Dominion War blood screening.
Which was unpopular then, but now looks like a stand for civil liberties.
Absolutely. And at the same time, they're debating a less visible seat on the Technology Council, and this is what brought Deputy COS Z4 Blue to the forefront with an unexpected pitch. Z4, who actually worked for Bacco's opponent during the election, passionately argued for the inclusion of another Nasat, C-29 Green.
And Ashante Fury, his colleague, just dismisses him.
Immediately. She noted that C-29 always voted with the majority and had no thoughts of his own. Why risk Bacco's political capital on someone viewed as a follower? This is where Z4 uses his unique insight into character to change the entire political conversation.
Tell us the anecdote. This is where personal principles really define the professional choice.
Z4 defended C-29 Green with this detailed story that just cuts through the typical metrics of political success. He explains that C-29 Green was the only Forest Quadrant governor who supported this highly ambitious and experimental idea for a high-speed pneumatic tube transport system on Nasat.
Which everyone else called impractical and dangerous.
Exactly. And C-29 Green's reasoning for taking that immense risk.
What was it?
His philosophy encapsulated Bacco's own risk-taking mindset. He said, if it doesn't work, what do we lose? But if it does work, we win a lot. Furthermore, after the system was a huge success and became an economic engine for Nasat, C-29 Green refused all credit.
He famously said, who cares who gets credit as long as the right thing is done?
That's the quote.
That's the critical pivot. That narrative, the willingness to risk failure for a major win, and the complete lack of ego, that was precisely the leadership principle Nan Bacco valued above all else.
Absolutely. Ashante immediately agrees that C-29 should be put on the list, recognizing that this story would appeal directly to the president's wheelhouse. It shows how deep-seated, humble, personal leadership principles can just totally influence high-level political decisions over traditional political metrics.
It shows Bacco doesn't want yes men. She wants people who are willing to fail spectacularly trying to succeed.
Even as Bacco handles internal politics, she's immediately hit by these external crises that test her diplomatic and command authority. The first major test is the Riemann refugee dilemma.
Which carried massive implications for the Klingon alliance.
Massive.
We're talking about a ship full of Riemann refugees, former allies of Shinzon, and historical enemies of the Romulans, traveling in this slow, old vessel called the Vikruk.
And they're heading straight toward Neutral Zone Outpost 22. This immediately becomes a security and political nightmare. Granting them asylum would directly violate treaties with the Klingons and Romulans.
So the Secretary of Defense, Risa Shostakova, she advocates turning them back.
Immediately. Fearing irreparable damage to the Klingon alliance, which was already strained. And the Klingons, they weren't waiting for diplomacy. They were sending a Chancellor-class warship, the Dita.
And here's a critical military detail. The Dita had a cruising speed of warp 8. The Federation's contemporary Intrepid-class vessels, they cruised at warp 6.
Right, so the Klingons were militarily superior in speed and rapidly closing the distance. It added immense pressure to Bacco's decision time.
So Bacco's decision here is a masterclass in strategic circumvention.
It is. It's a move designed to protect the refugees without overtly breaking treaty obligations. She orders Starfleet to escort the Riemanns to neutral space via smaller, hard-to-track craft, shuttlecraft, and runabouts to avoid direct conflict with the Dita. She effectively avoids abrogating the treaty.
She is trying to split the difference between morality and legality.
Yes. But the truly dramatic move is invoking the Spock mandate. Ambassador Spock was on a long-term mission to Romulus, deeply embedded in the reconstruction efforts. Bacco pulls him back and forces him into service.
Using her presidential authority, stating flatly, you work for me unless you're resigning your post.
Exactly. She orders Spock to travel directly to the Klingon homeworld, Kono S, to plead the Riemanns case to the High Council. She knows Spock is maybe the only Federation voice the Klingon Chancellor Martok will even consider listening to.
She's leveraging his personal prestige and unique historical standing to prevent a political disaster. But the outcome, despite her best efforts, is just devastating.
The Klingons reject the plea. Ambassador Rozhenko reports that they respect the Riemanns primarily because it gets the Romulans really mad, but they will not allow them passage. And tragically, before Bacco's escort plan can fully succeed, the Remans on the Vikruk commit suicide by Starfleet at Outpost 22,
They attack the outpost, citing Shinzon's battle cry, "Victory and Freedom."
resulting in their own deaths and the loss of 3 Federation personnel.
It's a gut-wrenching moment. Bacco's strategic brilliance failed against the sheer desperation and hopelessness of the Reman people. It's a devastating introduction to the complexities of intergalactic governance.
And Bacco doesn't even have time to process that profound failure. She immediately pivots to the Delta Korea water dispute.
Right. These two nations, long-standing rivals, are deadlocked in negotiations in the Calais Westcott room.
They are fighting over access to the carry-on water reclamation system, and this system is critical
Why so critical?
because Delta's water table is poisoned by deadly Jem'Hadar toxins left over from the Dominion War. The carry-on system is the only scalable technology available to clear those toxins and save the Deltan population from environmental collapse and mass sickness.
And the negotiations had been deadlocked for 2 months.
2 months, devolving into just endless slander and threats.
So Bacco realized diplomacy had failed. Her intervention is abrupt, calculated, and frankly ruthless.
Absolutely. She enters the room, and in this moment of brilliant psychological warfare, she starts by formally apologizing to the Carrion ambassador Yorgis for the Deltan slander. She validates his frustration and throws him completely off balance.
A moment of peace before the nuclear option.
Precisely. She pivots from kindness to profound menace. She privately informs Ambassador Yorgas that if they do not reach a full agreement on resource sharing in the next 30 minutes,
30 minutes.
the Federation will unilaterally declare war on the Carrion.
Declare war on a member-adjacent world that is nominally under Federation protection. That is an unprecedented use of presidential leverage.
It is. But the context is everything. This is a life-saving technology necessary to avert environmental collapse on Delta. Bacco prioritized the critical resource and lives over diplomatic niceties, using the ultimate threat, the specter of Federation war, as extreme leverage to force immediate cooperation.
Shifting our focus, Bacco's administration then has to deal with 2 completely different forms of external crisis.
Yeah.
A bizarre failure in first contact that turns into a complex medical mystery.
And a deeply traumatic ethical dilemma with a former enemy.
Let's start with the Trinket. This was supposed to be a textbook case for diplomatic relations.
Totally. I mean, these were people who survived their sun going nova by physically placing their planet in a pyramid-shaped box and moving it to the Mu Aries system.
An incredible feat. They sound like ideal new Federation members, but their first attempt at relations, a state dinner, was a catastrophe.
It was chaos. The delegation, led by Speaker Utriol, acted strained, squinting, demanding, and ultimately behaved like a Chalnoth delegation, just rude and agitated, before storming out.
But 3 months later, a second attempt at a formal meeting in the council chamber resulted in Utriol and the delegates collapsing simultaneously on the speaker's floor.
So clearly something physical was desperately wrong. It wasn't a diplomatic slight.
That's when Starfleet medical Dr. Emanuele, Captain DeSoto, and Dr. Papadimitriou stepped in.
And the diagnosis was shocking. The Trinic's peripheral nervous systems were operating at a critically low level. They were hyporeactive because of prolonged exposure to the intense magnetic field of their new home system, Mu Aries.
So their nervous systems were functionally shutting down.
Exactly. And this was fascinating to Starfleet Medical because it was the exact opposite of a famous case Starfleet had dealt with on the USS Io, where Captain Tivrea's crew had suffered from overloaded, hyperreactive nervous systems.
So Bacco's resolution here avoids politics entirely. She just treats it as a logistical and medical crisis.
She does. She leveraged Starfleet resources, sending the Hood to transport them home, and used the Strata as intermediaries. It shows that sometimes the solution to a diplomatic crisis isn't negotiation, but a complex medical and logistical evacuation.
That complex problem, however, pales in comparison to the Sankaty-Kaltai crisis, which forced Bacco to confront pure ethical brinkmanship.
This is a devastating event. The son of its Sankaty minister, Selnira Zarak, was dying of a spine growth called Kaltai. Zarak, against Sankaty prejudice, went rogue and contacted the Federation through a recently imprisoned Tellarite reporter, desperate for the only known cure.
And the only person who could perform that surgical procedure, Dr. Rebecca Emanuele, the chief medical officer of Starbase 1.
The tragic irony is that Dr. Emanuele was a Sankaty prisoner for 4 grueling years during the war. They had faked her death to keep her out of prisoner exchanges, forcing her to save Sankaty soldiers. They treated her like an object, their pet doctor. Her trauma was profound.
So Emanuele refused to perform the surgery. She was asked to save the child of a race that had tortured her. This is where Bacco faces the ultimate moral test.
And Bacco refuses to order the surgery. She tells Emanuele that forcing her to operate would be doing the exact same thing that Secrecy had done to her during the war, removing her agency. Instead, Bacco begs Emanuele. She appeals to her own deeply held beliefs. She asks the doctor to recognize that Minister Zarok had made a profound choice.
He risked his career and reputation to save his son.
Exactly. Bacco asks Emanuele to honor that choice by saving the child. It's an appeal to a higher, universal morality.
Prioritizing consent over a political or even humanitarian goal, she chose morality over efficiency.
Tragically, despite Emanuele agreeing to try, the Kaltai was too advanced. The child, Zormunk, died before she could save him, even though she went to extraordinary lengths. In grief and protest, Dr. Emanuele immediately resigned her commission.
And the Secrecy response only amplified the disaster. Their state-run press spun the whole thing as a failed Federation kidnapping attempt.
Yeah, turning Bacco's act of profound ethical courage into a diplomatic disaster. The lesson here is brutal. Sometimes acting on your highest moral principle does not result in a good outcome.
The ethical challenges continued to mount, shifting inward from external politics to the very definition of life and due process within the Federation Judiciary Council.
The famous Daystrom Institute android case involving B4 Data's prototype was the flashpoint. A civilian scientist, Lars Patek, petitioned the Judiciary Council to dismantle B4 for study.
And his argument was,
it was technically brilliant, but legally devastating. He argued that despite having Data's full memory download, B4 lacked genuine sentience. Patek pointed out that B4 barely had cognitive functions and could only say, when asked about being dismantled, "I don't mind."
which pulled Captain Bruce Maddox into the fray, the same man who, years ago, argued against Data's sentience.
The irony is incredible. Maddox had completely reversed his position and now argued fiercely that dismantling B4 was comparable to murder. He said that if an organic life form had cognitive difficulties, we wouldn't ethically allow them to be killed for research.
But Patek kept pointing to B4's own lack of self-preservation. I don't mind. This is where Maddox provided the trump card.
A brilliant rhetorical masterstroke. He called the emergency medical hologram, the EMH, as a witness.
The EMH.
Yep. The EMH testified that he was a sentient, voting Federation citizen who started out with extremely limited cognitive functions, relying purely on programming. He successfully drew the parallel. He, like B4, began as a limited program, but his sentience developed over time.
So the EMH's very existence rebutted Patek's core argument. The court ruled that initial limitations do not preclude the potential for full personhood.
A massive philosophical victory for the rights of artificial life. Meanwhile, Bacco had to deal with internal corruption and compromised ideals in her next organic judicial appointee. This led to the Archon scandal.
Counselor Archer Nayel was the leading candidate for the Judiciary Council, perceived as stable, experienced.
Right. But a junior staffer named Bei To smuggled out a pad revealing a hidden, classified emergency magisterial decision from 8 years prior during the height of Dominion War paranoia.
And the revelation was
That Archon, serving as the supreme magisterial authority on Triex, had ordered the imprisonment of a Federation citizen named Wusakel, a cameloid shapeshifter, without a trial, simply because Wusakel was a shapeshifter.
And Archon defended this.
He did. He claimed it was necessary to protect Wusak from a lynch mob that was terrified he was a founder in disguise, and to keep Triex safe. He made a pragmatic argument. I sacrifice due process for one person to save their life and prevent mass panic.
But Bacco recognized that this action undermined the fundamental charter of the Federation.
She saw it as the ultimate test of Federation ideals, and she used it to solidify her own moral authority. She forced Archon's immediate public resignation.
And her language was precise and powerful.
It was. She declared that while the Federation was manipulated by an awful foe during the war, we have come dangerously close to sacrificing our ideals, but we will not go over that precipice. Archon's resignation was a necessary political sacrifice, proving Bacco would prioritize due process over political expediency.
The final threads of Bacco's turbulent first year all tie back to the core secret and the massive influence of Admiral Ross. Osla Granov's ultimatum forces Bacco's hand into a final confrontation.
Granov's condition was clear. Admiral Ross must no longer exert undue and illegal influence over the Federation or Starfleet. The alternative was the expose that would trigger the Klingon War. Bacco confronts Ross directly in the Monet room.
And Ross admits the truth.
The whole thing. He admits the truth of the Zife scandal and Starfleet's role in the forced retirement. And he finally explains his justification to Bacco. He tells her the former administration killed millions of people, referencing the casualties from the cannons, the Klingon retaliation, and the ensuing guerrilla war, and caused further death to cover it up.
His confession is chilling because he admits guilt while insisting on necessity.
He is completely unapologetic about the coup, but accepts his fate.
And what does Bacco demand? A resignation.
A quiet retirement, not a resignation which would send up political red flags and confirm to Graniff that he was forced out. He takes this step believing Bacco must be shielded from the true extent of the covert organization that executed Zife. He hints that Zife's death was not the end of that shadowy group.
So Bacco successfully ends the Zife saga by sacrificing the perpetrator of the coup to preserve her office and prevent a war. Meanwhile, she has to fight another legislative battle.
Renewing critical aid to the post-war Kardashian Union, this is politically toxic.
All right, the Kardashians are largely seen as irredeemable enemies. The bill is in jeopardy because of counselors motivated by revenge like Beta Seed's counselor Enerin, whose people were victims of Krell Mosset's horrific experiments.
But Deputy COS Ashante Fury steps in for a major diplomatic win, demonstrating the quiet power of historical awareness.
Oh, she do.
She convinces Counselor Enerin by drawing a powerful Earth historical analogy: the harsh reparations placed on Germany after World War I. She explained how those reparations crippled the German economy, fostered deep resentment, and led directly to the rise of a charismatic leader and an even larger, more devastating war.
She's arguing against letting immediate outrage blind them to history's lessons.
And it worked. The aid passed, and the year ends on a high diplomatic note with the COAS.
The COAS officially joined the Federation, a major victory. The story itself is incredible. Starfleet's Da Vinci crew helped move their planet.
And Bacco takes the stage at the signing ceremony, and in this moment of great humility, she reframes the Federation's role. She thanks the COAS for their nobility in taking a huge risk to join the Federation based on ancient tales of its goodness. It was a moment that shifted the focus from Federation might to COA nobility.
A much-needed narrative of hope after a year of relentless crises.
And Bacco, having survived the year, signals a return to political cooperation by delivering that crucial apology speech to the Council. She then prepares for a summit with the Klingon Chancellor Martok and the new Romulan ambassador, hoping to mitigate tensions and asserting that talking is the solution to everything.
So what does this all mean? Bacco's first year was defined by massive inherited crises.
The Zife cover-up, the Riemann tragedy, the Tsinkithi dilemma. But she survived and ultimately thrived by using this complex mixture of unconventional, even ruthless leverage, like with the Korea water dispute.
And ethical courage, like forcing Artran's resignation.
And personal humility with her public apology. She proved that effective leadership requires adaptability, but also a core, non-negotiable moral center, even when it costs you politically or emotionally.
So we've seen today that the Palais de la Concorde is less a beacon of light and more a nexus of complex, often dirty, power struggles. The biggest insight is that ethical tightrope walk required of President Bacco.
Right.
She had to cover up a previous administration's illegal war crime to prevent a war with the Klingons. Yet she then had to immediately sacrifice a powerful admiral, Ross, who committed a coup to maintain that fragile peace, all to preserve political integrity and stave off the journalistic expose that would have collapsed her presidency.
Nan Bacco proved that maintaining the Federation's highest ideals like fair trade, due process, welcoming new worlds, often requires its leadership to make profoundly difficult, even illegal decisions behind closed doors, forcing a sitting president from office, threatening a declaration of war for leverage. Her administration exists in the permanent shadow of necessary compromise.
Which raises an important question for you, the learner, to consider. If protecting the Federation's existence requires sacrificing its stated morality, sometimes violently or ruthlessly, what ultimately is the greater good?